Ceremonies. They practiced sacrifice to gods. They did both animal and human sacrifice. Humans were burned, drowned, hanged, were all different forms of sacrifice. They also used sacrifice to foretell the future by the position that the victim fell in, or the way the limbs convulsed, or how blood spurted from the wound. Now, there's actual little archaeological evidence of sacrifice, and most of that information comes from the Greek and Roman texts. So again, I'm going to take a grain of salt with that because of the way the Romans and the Greeks thought of the Celts. Now, the Druids ruled on all religious questions, and they acted as judges in civil cases. So they were the judge in criminal complaints. They settled boundary disputes. They enforced their decisions by banning people from taking part in the sacrificial ceremonies, and thereby they were cutting them off from access to the gods. During the reign of the Celts, we see increased social stratification, and again, this particularly shows up in burials. So at a site called Vie in France, we have the princess burial, dated to about 2530 BP, and this is of a woman about 35 years old. We found her remains in a ground tomb. It was lined with planks. She was lying in a wagon bed, whose wheels were detached and placed at corners, and then the individual was covered with a leather blanket. A lot of jewelry was found: bronze brooches, pins, amber beads. They found this bronze crater, which you can see here in this middle graphic. This was about 5 feet high and weighed about 450 pounds and could hold about 280 gallons of liquid. And we also found a lot of Greek pottery, or I shouldn't say we, the people who excavated it found Greek pottery. So, increasing social stratification, quite the lavish burial here. Now, part of what we know about the Iron Age of Europe comes from bog bodies. Now, these are found over northern Germany, Scandinavia, and England. We found hundreds of men, women, and children who were killed and then placed in peat bogs. And these peat bogs have a lot of tannic acids in them, so it was a great way to preserve the human remains. Now, most of the individuals that have been found do show evidence of a violent death. Some date to about 10,000 BP, but most of the bog bodies that have been found do date to the Iron Age. Now, these are part of sacrifice to gods to ensure good harvest is one of the possible explanations. Other people have suggested that the individuals were sacrificed as a way to ensure victory in war. The most well-known of the bog bodies is the Tolen Man, found in Denmark, dated from 2300 to 2100 BP. This individual was strangled with a leather belt, which you can still see around the neck here. Stomach contents were a gruel made of barley, which suggests to archaeologists that this individual died or was killed in winter and spring. But you can see the tannic acids here really do show quite a bit of detail. I mean, you can see the wrinkles in the face. You can still see the clothing that they're wearing. Again, the detail in the leather belt itself is pretty amazing, and the hat. So the tannic acids just kind of leach all the water, and of course tannins are what we use to work leather, hence the leathery look on the individual themselves. So another bog body is Holdremos woman, also found in Denmark, dated 2160 to 1660 BP, and this particular individual does look like it was quite a violent death. The arm was severed and the body kind of hacked a little bit. Grabau man, 2170 to 1920, also found gruel in his stomach, or kind of think cream of wheat kind of thing. This individual was blindfolded and garroted, which means they were kind of cut across the throat. Elling woman, 2350 to 1900 BP, strangled by a belt. Lindau man, 2000 to 1900 BP, strangled and hit on the head and throat cut in rapid succession. Now, this is kind of an interesting burial or bog body because the actual death, the strangulation, the blunt trauma to the head, and the cutting of the throat is actually something that pops up in Irish mythology called the threefold death. So now we're actually kind of seeing a physical manifestation of a type of death reflected or represented in Irish mythology. But these individuals are important because we can learn so much about Iron Age life, at least, again, a snapshot of an individual, because of the amazing preservation. So we can learn about diet, and we can learn about health, and we can learn about the clothing that was used during this time frame. Now, the end of the Iron Age occurs when the Romans conquer somebody. So, like in Great Britain, the Romans end up conquering the last group of people around 2043 BP. During this time frame, we see a lot of heavily fortified settlements. We see a lot of hill forts because they're more easily defendable. We see defensive ditches. We see defensive walls. At Maiden Castle in England, we see something called multivalet walls. So if you look at this over here, the fort itself was up here top, and you can see the series of walls. But what's interesting is that what you don't see is like a straight line entrance going up from the first wall all the way to the top. What we see are staggered entrances. So you have to go down here before you can go to the next level, and then you have to go, somewhere else, and you keep winding back and forth, kind of zigzagging the entrance to the next level, making it a little bit more easily defended. And actually, if you saw Lord of the Rings movies, you can see the same kind of concept in Gondor. Some of the things we find are these kind of big deposits of stones, which were used for kind of missiles.